This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our weekly board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating this call. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself while the presenters are speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you're calling in from your cell phone, please take a moment to physically mute your cell phone, as I'm unable to mute you from my computer unless I mute all participants. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under services. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Rader, and I'm your MC for this board chair check-in and update. And I'm going to start with a little bit of an update on a few things. Vin Mastaro, as you all know, our policy guru, has written a policy on masks. We are still getting a lot of calls on that. Vin, I was hoping you could talk for a minute about that.
Sure. As Bob said, we do have a new face mask policy. We've dual codified it because it's applicable to both staff and students, as well as visitors to the school site. We believe that the policy fulfills the requirement as contained in the reopening document. You'll find in the policy definitions for face coverings and masks and face shields and clear plastic barriers, because they are used in the policy document itself. There are sections in the policy pertaining to transportation, to school buildings, to limited exceptions to the use of the masks, mask break sessions, and also community outreach. It clearly spells out that they have to be worn, and inside the building, even when social distancing is being maintained. There is an exception listed there for staff in the instructional process that they perhaps would not wear it, but then again, a social distancing of more than 6 feet has to be maintained, and also some type of physical barrier between them and the students. It talks to the medical exemption, and there we're specifying that a written document is necessary from a physician in order for that to come into play. It also deals with violations of the policy, and basically if a student does not come to school with such face mask and refuses to wear the one that's provided by the district, the student really cannot remain in the building. The same goes true for visitors, that they have to wear a face mask. And the policy also speaks to issues in terms of outdoors, and playgrounds, and the like. The policy is available upon request, and we've also posted it on the CABE website in the member section under hot policy topics.
Great. Thank you so much, Vin.
You're welcome.
Couple of things I wanted to mention. In particular, there is a webinar going on this morning with the commissioner, and my understanding is that they have over 1,000 people on it, so I thank you again for being on ours. I have asked SDE for where the website will be because I know it's being recorded. I haven't heard back yet, but we'll certainly get that out to you when we hear. But thank you for being on our webinar. A couple of other things. SDE and CABE are working together, and it's possible that CAS and CAPS will be part of this working together on an FAQ page. I have given the department a lot of the questions that you've asked at different meetings, as well as things that we came up with. So you'll probably see that soon, and that will be available to everybody. Just so you know, a few days ago, the superintendents received templates on reopening model plans. I think what they did was they did it for all kids coming in, continued distance learning, and a hybrid. So you might want to ask your superintendent for those. We certainly have it, but it gets into some of the logistical areas, and I think the superintendents should have it first. Also, continued questions we've heard on the governor's calls and others about resources. We're pushing that very hard. The unions are pushing that very hard. CAPS and CAS are pushing that very hard. And I just want to remind you that the department sent out surveys on what things are going to cost for districts, and they plan to use that as, I guess, a starting point in going to higher ups in the legislature, as well as the governor's office, to see what they can do as far as providing these resources. So please make sure that your districts are getting that back. Certainly, if I was a board member, I'd want to see what you need, so that if you talk to legislators, which I hope you will do, you will explain what's going on and how important those resources are for you if you're going to return to schools in the fall. So that is pretty much it for my updates. Does anybody else have any updates? Any members of senior staff or any board members want to just say things before I introduce Glenn? Okay, seeing none, it is an absolute pleasure to have Glenn Lungarini on our call this morning. Glenn, as you may know, is Executive Director of CAS CIAC. He became the Executive Director in August of 2018. He was 19 years as in public education as a coach, teacher, department chair, athletic director, assistant principal, and a principal. Glenn has been a very good friend to CABE. We work together on a lot of different things, and we very much appreciate the work that he is doing with CAS and with CIAC to keep our students safe as they go back. So I'm going to ask Glenn to talk a few minutes, and then I have some questions, but certainly it's more important if board chairs have questions, and you can write them in the chat box is usually the easiest way to pose the question. So with that, Glenn.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your group today. And just want to start and again, continue to thank Bob and Patrice for their partnership, both through CAS and CIAC. We've enjoyed a very good working relationship in the 2 years I've been here. Many times we see each other up at the legislative building and in conversations there, but I just in sharing on the reopening committees and things, I'd say your boards are very well represented with the leadership that Bob and Patrice offer, and the insight and your position that they certainly make known in those. And I can tell you from our standpoint, I think we've been pretty much on the same page in just about everything, at least over the last 2 years. Very much enjoyed that, and so appreciate it, Bob. And again, the one thing that I think grounds us all and our board chairs and everybody else is we're trying to do the best we can for kids and trying to do the right thing we can for kids. And right now we're balancing how do we manage getting kids the best education experiences we can while still dealing with a pandemic that is very much still a part of our lives right now, and is still, contagious. And we see what's happening in other states, but Connecticut is doing very well right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with the responses that we've had, and as leadership and education, the leadership that our groups, our boards, our superintendents, our principals took in addressing this right away from a school standpoint. We know and we understand now as well that our kids need some experiences to come back. We know and we see the studies and the research that is being done right now about increased anxiety and depression that exists within kids, and what they're missing, and if opportunities present themselves to get our kids together in safe environments to re-engage with those meaningful relationships they have with their peers and with adults in their life, that now may be the right time for us to start getting kids back and doing that, and providing those physical needs, those social emotional needs, and re-engaging kids on a cognitive level as much as we can. So, we're very proud to partner with CAPS and CABE and in this work as we move forward, and do the best we can for kids. With that, we have issued guidance on returning to sports. And the one piece I'd like to, really emphasize with that is we've issued guidance. We have not issued any requirements, any mandates at this point. We are out of season right now. So everything that exists right now in terms of what's permissible has really been permissible through our regulations and our policies through CIAC for just about the last 30 years. I think it's 28 years that the current out of season rules have been in kind of in existence, the pretty much the way that they are now. So what we have done is given guidance around how to return to that slowly and how to do that safely. So through the month of July, our recommendation is that we are engaged in conditioning activities only, that we are doing this in small cohorts of 5 to 10, and our recommendation is that the activities take place outdoors. We do know that this is stricter and more restrictive than what the state's guidance is and the governor's guidance is. We know that youth sports are back. You can go to a sports facility and you can see basketball teams playing. You can go to softball fields and baseball fields and lacrosse fields, and you could see youth sports playing. But what differentiates CIAC from those opportunities, we are education-based. CIAC, Interscholastic Athletics, is an extension of your school curriculum. It is meant to take the passion that kids have for sport and to use that to extend your curriculum and continuing to develop students from a cognitive, social, emotional, and mental health standpoint. And we're not all about winning. We're not all about scholarships. We're not. That's not what our goal and our purpose is. We still want to work with school districts, and we want our primary focus to be yours. That we want kids safely re-engaged in on-campus learning activities come the end of August, beginning of September is our primary goal. And our secondary goal is to re-engage them in the extracurricular activities that they enjoy. Understanding sports is the largest of that. 43% of our high school students participate in sports in the state of Connecticut. That's over 70,000 athletes, student athletes that we have in the state of Connecticut. So we understand the responsibility of trying to do this in a safe manner, given how much our students enjoy playing sports. We also respect the responsibility that there's probably aren't many extracurricular activities beyond sports that draw emotion like sports does. When you think about everything that our school systems have been through in the last 4 months, there are 2 items that drew protest. One was when the CIAC canceled winter tournaments, and the second was graduation. And so, we recognize those things and understand the emotion that comes with it. But hopefully what we've demonstrated to you is if the right decision is the hard decision, we're still going to make that decision. We're going to do what is right for our kids, and we're going to do what's right for to help our schools and help our boards to provide the safest experiences that we can first. At the same time, as I said, we know that sports are back, and you see sports around the state being played. So from a high school standpoint, we understand there's going to be a lot of pressure there to play sports, and we think the CIAC is going to be able to do this safer than other groups are going to be able to do it with better guidance behind it, and from the purpose of connecting with your school curriculums. And you know, it's clear if we don't lead and do this, somebody else will, because they're taking place already. So with that, Bob, I'm happy to answer any questions that we can for you. I could tell you also at 1 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to have our first meeting through CIAC of a subcommittee that we have looking now specifically at fall sports. Now that we've got conditioning regoing, we're going to look specifically at fall sports. It is a
Lost you for a second there.
Yeah, he seems to be having connection issues.
Oh, no. Glenn? I don't even know if you can hear me at this point. I don't know what's going on. Can somebody call Glenn, or I have the number. I have a number. Excuse me?
Bob, he may be trying to reconnect.
Okay. Okay. So I'm supposed to tap dance for a little while. Is that it? No, as Glenn said, we work very closely together. And I know that he spends a lot of time thinking about this connection between sports and academics, and certainly socio-emotional learning and what kids are going to need as they go back. Glenn, can you at least hear us now? Well, I apologize to everybody. This seems to happen too often, but we're sort of at the mercy of the elements to some extent. One of the things I'm going to ask Glenn when he comes back is whether a decision like that made in the Ivy League to cancel all fall sports competitions would put any extra pressure on what Connecticut is thinking about, what CIAC is thinking about. A lot of pressure coming down, I think. And I'd just like to know how the athletic directors are handling this. That might be a decision they have to make at their meeting this afternoon, but I will ask Glenn when he's back. And Craig Zimmerman, I see you have a question. I don't want to read it. I would ask Marie to read it, but let's wait till Glenn's back. I see a couple of questions. Karen Klein also asked a question. I just got a text from Glenn that he's trying to get back in. If we can wait a couple of minutes, if not, we'll go on to the board chair share, as I call it. So please just hold on for a couple of minutes.
Maybe some of the questions, Bob, would be helpful to the rest of us, though, in terms of, maybe somebody's got the same question, we could hear from them, or they've got answers.
But we're waiting for the person with the answers.
So I'm just wondering if other districts are, maybe they can share the question and start talking amongst themselves too.
Sure. Craig, you want to ask your question? I see it's a fairly long one.
Yeah, so it's really just two parts. One is, have they given any consideration to moving any of the quote high risk fall sports to the spring, like some colleges are doing, i.e. football as an example. And when the CIAC does potentially move around some sports or change some dates, are they going to give some thought to pre-existing non-school sports, call it Premier Soccer, Legion Baseball? There's a whole host that will be affected potentially by what the schools do. But the most important part of the question is just, I know Glenn was just talking about fall sports, and it's probably too early for an answer, but is there any consideration being given, instead of canceling something, to just moving it to the spring, for example?
There, you got your first question, Glenn. Were you able to hear that? I see you're back on.
Yeah, I heard most of that. I apologize. My connection got lost there for a moment. So we're everything at this point is on the table, and we're looking at all considerations. The extreme difficulty in moving seasons is that there are so many kids that are multi-sport athletes that as soon as you move a sport, you create a conflict. So if we move, let's just take the sport of football. If you move football to the spring, an overwhelming number of our football players play baseball and lacrosse. So now we're creating conflict there. Same thing with our field hockey players and softball players. So there's the difficulty in moving season is just that the amount of conflict that you create. So in our initial look at it, there's no good answer to moving a season. It's really going to be dependent on the Department of Health and our medical professionals. So we work specifically with the Connecticut State Medical Society Sports Medicine Committee. And that it's a group of about 25 doctors that range from pediatricians to orthopedic specialists and surgeons, general practitioners. Great group to work with. So we're going to rely largely with them if it's safe for us in Connecticut to play football, if it's safe for us to play soccer, to play those sports. I think you're more likely to see potentially an earlier end to the season where we try to complete all of our championships before Thanksgiving. That would align more with what we're seeing at the college and university level in terms of kids not being back on campus after Thanksgiving, and given some extended time between competition from Thanksgiving to maybe January 1st during the onset of flu season. But those are the big challenges right now in terms of moving a season. Is just the number of conflicts you create. The other big thing with moving anything from the spring to the fall, there are so many unknowns. We would really be reluctant to take a demographic of kids who just lost an entire spring and put them in a scenario where they may be impacted and lose more of a season by playing in a fall. We want to try to protect that. But we're also looking at kind of a scenario where what if it wasn't safe to play anything in the fall? What if we had from January to June and we had 6 months to play 26, 27 sports, and what would that look like to try to get that in? So that just kind of gives you an idea that every scenario is on the table and being explored from our standpoint.
Glenn, I had asked the question about whether the fact that the Ivy League has now decided to do away with all fall sports, whether that puts more pressure on you. And we have a question from Karen Klein asking, what are the ramifications? Since we talk about football is probably the most popular of the sports, and how are we going to keep kids from, God forbid, infecting each other? So can you talk about the thinking behind the expectation of going ahead with that?
Yeah, sure. You know, what the colleges are doing, we're looking and we're learning from that, but I wouldn't say it necessarily impacts us. You know, part of my past as well. For 7 years, I was an assistant baseball coach at Yale, and worked very closely in the NCAA as well. We're a very different experience than the NCAA is. You know, and from a college standpoint, you got to remember too that you're traveling from you know from state to state in really all cases to play games. And you know, the Ivy League is a little unique because it was rare that we were getting on a plane to travel. Most of our competition was in the New England states, so you know it was mostly bus travel. But you're still, you know, you're staying in hotels, you're traveling, you know, so that isn't part of what we're experiencing. You know, in high school, our competition is in Connecticut. You know, so it's much different there. What we're seeing also at the NCAA level, you know, the Ivy League canceling as well, as in the, you know, nobody, your football team wins the Ivy League championship, you don't go to a bowl. You know, there's no postseason, you know, kind of implication there. There's no scholarships in the Ivy League. There's no scholarships in the Patriot League, the Little Ivies. You know, so in those scenarios where that money isn't at stake, and you know, we're not surprised to see those colleges cancel. We're seeing things like in the Big Ten and the SEC where they're really wrestling with stuff right now is what happens when one school's criteria is different than another. So, you know, and that is something that I do think is a trickle down into high school. So what if one town says, you know, if one kid has tested positive, then the team needs to shut down for a 10-day period. But the next town or the next league says, well, if 3 kids test positive, then the team needs to shut down. So that's you know, that's a debate that's happening within the NCAA right now, and is something that we're looking at because I do think that happens at the local level as well. And you see that from a school standpoint, right? Because what a local Department of Health says in one town may be very different from what happens across the state in another town. So that's a piece that I think from CIAC standpoint, we're going to need to provide guidance to districts on what we think the right balance for that would be in terms of guidelines of when you break from practice, when you break from games with that. Another way that we can combat that we're talking about is do we consider more regional play? So for example, you know, a conversation we're going to have, you know, maybe just take, you know, we'll take girls soccer for an example. You know, rather than playing 16 games throughout your conference, do we look at the 5 closest towns, and do we say let's play regional? Let's play a home and home, play 10 games within that region, and reduce that the number of games you play a little bit, so you build in time in that season that if somebody needed to take a 2-week break or a 10-week break because there was an issue in a school or with a team with a positive test, you have that flexibility, and you're more likely to have the same experiences of the towns closest to you. You know, as you know, like you could look at things like the Southwest Conference where you have, you know, Bunnell High School in Stratford or Notre Dame of Fairfield, but then you also have, you know, Joe Barlow High School in Brookfield and New Milford. You know, it's a very large span of teams in those conferences. Same things in, you know, the SEC, the CCC. So those are all considerations that we're having right now in talking with our athletic directors. We're trying to give that decision to them by August 1st because we feel that they would need that time to adjust schedules to be able to meet that need if we go in that direction. But those are all considerations we're making at this time. So definitely learning from, you know, it's great to have the NCAA started now and we get to learn from them and see how they're doing and take that valuable information. The other thing we're really learning from is the AAUs and the clubs right now. I speak frequently with coaches and directors of AAUs and club teams right now. And in Connecticut, with those sports having started on June 20th, nobody has shared yet that any team has need to stop playing in Connecticut because of a positive test. That's very encouraging, and that goes right along with the cautious optimism of our doctors. So it means that kids are respecting the limitations that are being put in place, like no gum chewing, maintaining social distancing, no spitting on the field, no high fives. You know, that they're really limiting that, doing a good job sanitizing equipment and balls and things. And it's been sports in Connecticut so far from the youth level have been very successful since they restarted on June 20th.
Great, thank you. That's good to hear. Marie, do you want to read one or two of the questions?
So, okay. Did we cover Fiona's question? Let's see.
Not really.
Okay, so Fiona asks, is it the intent of CIAC to have each district make their own decision regarding if they will play fall sports, or will the CIAC be making the decision? So I think she continued, if it is individual districts, will you require a minimum number of teams participating in the conference to hold a season?
Sure. So we would rely on individual districts to make that decision, you know, because again, I think, you know, what we experience in some parts or what an individual town experiences may be very different from what others are experiencing. But with that, we will remain very flexible in that. Again, what we want to do is we want to provide any opportunity we can for kids to engage in sports. To us, the winning and losing isn't the important part. It's the participation, it's the engagement, and so we want to provide that to as many kids as we can, as long as it's safe to do so. But we respect that individual schools need to make the determination of what's best for them. We will not limit anybody in terms of how many, you know, who plays, how many teams they decide to play. We will support anything that our school districts, our you know, our boards, our superintendents, our principals feel is in the best interest of their kids. You know, to that point as well, you're seeing that now. So with conditioning right now, we do see a lot of schools that have begun doing it in the small cohorts. But we also see a lot of districts that have decided that it's not right for them to start yet. So I don't believe Waterbury started yet. I don't believe Stanford has started yet. Norwalk, I don't think has started yet. Plainfield, I don't think has started yet. There's a number out there that have chosen not to do that, and we support that 100%. That's their decision. We support that decision. Our preseason practice requirement, which starts at the onset of our season, is designed to and was recommended by our medical doctors as the time frame appropriate to engage in education-based activities. So we don't think anybody is necessarily losing anything if they decide not to do conditioning right now. And we'll support districts any way we can to give kids meaningful experiences.
Great, great. Let me, since we're running out of time a little bit, and I see some more questions about transportation and other issues, but let me change the subject a little. Glenn, what are you hearing from your principals? How are they holding up? Do they feel that they will be ready to get back to school?
Yes, but stressed. You know, I think that, you know, the one thing from principals, and again, I just say this from my experience to you, I think by and large, we're a group of people that say, tell me what I have to work with and I'll make it work. You know, from a board standpoint, you know, you guys are the ones, along with superintendents, that fight for the funds, fight for the money, From a principal standpoint, that's not our fight. Our fight is, listen, when the referendum's done and we have, these are the resources we have to work with. This is what we have to work with, and let's give our kids the best experiences we can. So I think that mindset is strong. I think our principals I think our principals and our teachers, I think you guys too, miss our kids as much as our kids miss each other. So having any type of activity on campus, we're just seeing bring smiles to our administrators' faces. So there's certainly concern because safety is always paramount and number one on everybody's mind in education. So we want to make sure our kids and our staff are back in a safe scenario, just as you do. But there is excitement and joy in the prospect of having kids and teachers back on campus, and principals are ready to answer the challenge for that.
Great, great. Is there anything board should specifically know about what's going on with the principals, how to support them, or just keep doing the support that they generally give to principals and administrators?
Right. Same challenge that you're dealing with right now. And I would say, we just keep them as part of the process with understanding the specific details, right? I think that the guidance that came out from the State Department, the governor's office on reopening, while that left a lot of questions unanswered, it also left a lot of flexibility for individual boards. So with that, I think just having, including, your administration as part of the discussion, your principals, as well as your superintendents, I think is important and helps them understand how to best create schedules and for students as well as staff. Things like you can cohort in classrooms even at the elementary and middle school level, but how do you eat? And how do you coordinate lunch, and how do you, what about recess, and and so those are all things that are on the minds of those particulars of principals, and we're good at organizing those. We just being part of that process. But Bob, I'll say this as well, as principals, we understand too, we see things from a building level. Your superintendents and boards see things from a district level. You have a much wider scope and viewpoint of things than we do. Our task is to successfully run, our buildings, and so we appreciate that and recognize that and enjoy being part of the conversation with it. But we also recognize the task of our superintendents and boards is to look at what's best for all in the district and not just one building. So, just understand we come with that appreciation.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, Don.
Yeah, Len, I just want to say thank you on behalf of, I am the current president of CABE, but in my other life, I spent 25 years at Bloomfield High School as an athletic director and 6 years as a high school principal. So I know what they're going through. I know what you're going through. And I just want to thank you for all the hard work that you're putting in and trying to get these kids back on the playing field again. It's gonna be a tough fall, but I thank you for all your efforts that you're making.
Thanks, Dad. I appreciate it. And I think, just remember, it's, you folks are board chairs right now for a reason. You're supposed to be here to guide us as we work through this. Our superintendents, our principals, this is an unprecedented challenge, but we have the right people in every district in the places who should be there at this time to do this successfully. So we're all in it together. Thank you.
You got it.
Glenn, I'll just ask one very short question. Do you expect there to be more guidance put out when you meet with your athletic directors?
Yes, we will be giving more information, very specific, not only to the starter fall sports, but we'll be giving information very specific to sports. So, for example, you might see if we are moving forward with football, you might see guidance from us on how many people should be on the sidelines. You might see guidance like as specific as right now, the player boxes go to the 40-yard line, 30-yard line, 35-yard lines on each side of the field. We would recommend that extends to the 10-yard line on each side of the field, so you could space kids out, more with that. So there'll be guidance specific to sport, each individual sport, as well as overall guidance. We'll be given guidance on fans. How many fans do you have in attendance? Whether you have fans in attendance to start. So, that's where we see our responsibility, and hopefully as boards, you've been able to see that and appreciate it a little bit is, from a CAS and a CIAC standpoint, we've taken our responsibility to give you as direct guidance as we possibly can. We understand the state's job is to give broad guidance, but ours as a industry expert and sports specific industry is to give you as much direct guidance as we can to help you make specific decisions.
Terrific, Glenn. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your perspective, not only in the information you provided, but also in the wisdom of using sports to help with the social, emotional, and the academic aspects of school. It's not all about the sports. It's not all about the winning, as you said a couple of times. So I want to thank you, Glenn. Please feel free to share whatever comes out of that meeting with us. We will pass it down to the districts. So Glenn, you're very welcome to spend the rest of this hour with us. And now I turn it over to Patrice, who is our representative working with CAS in particular, and who does our board share part of the meeting. So Patrice.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks. I'm sorry, Patrice. I'm gonna step out. I appreciate it. And again, for any board chairs or anything, Bob and Patrice have my cell phone number. Anytime that you need me or anything I can do for you, whether it's for this group or boards in particular, I am available to you. So anything I could do. Thank you. And again, Bob and Patrice, always a pleasure working with you. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks so much, Glenn. It truly is a pleasure to work with Glenn and everyone at CAS CIAC. They're great state level partners. So this is your opportunity, board chairs, to share challenges or hopefully successes as you now are in your districts right in the middle of developing your reopening plans. And we know that the issue of resources comes up again and again. We raise it and others raise it every time we have conversations, ranging from a conversation that Don Harris, Sheila, and I had last week with Senator Doug McCrory, who, as many of you know, is the Senate Chair of the Education Committee, as well as all of our conversations with our statewide partners, including the Commissioner of Education. But what's on your mind today? Please feel free to share, as well as share any ideas you might have for upcoming specific topics to cover during our future check-ins.
Bob, just Brian has a question.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'd be really interested to hear what kind of reaction you're getting from the community, both internally as well as the community at large and the parents about the reopening of schools.
Board chairs, what can you share?
This is Liz. We're in the process of doing major outreach to citizens, and they're filling out surveys and so forth. But prior to this meeting, I was on a call with all of our parent liaisons and parent groups, and they're asking the same questions and that you are. Some parents do not want to send their kids back to school. Some can't wait to get them back to school. So I think it's a mixed bag. And I think our districts are going to be offering, district learning, or they're going to be maybe half days. So it's still up in the air, but the parents are asking the same questions, and they're pretty, actually, the ones that we spoke with this morning were very appreciative of the outreach and the way the district is trying to include them in the conversation. So I think they have to feel part of the solution. I guess that's what's important.
Yeah, I would concur on that. We've reached out to the parents in our district and we have asked their opinions on these things. And I think we're finding that there is a significant number of people who are not comfortable sending their children to school at this point. There's a much larger number that is. And I don't know whether that's a factor if they've had about enough of them in the house at this point or what. But I do believe that we're going to have to see who actually comes. I suspect people's views don't necessarily mirror what they'll do. So I think we're not going to know until we open the school.
And I would point out that based on the experience of other countries, you won't necessarily know on day one when you open school. That may change in the first week or two, as some families might become more comfortable and some families might become more concerned about having their child in school. Other board chairs, what's your community's reaction?
Can I ask a question that's related but not exactly the same?
Sure, Candace.
So I think one of the challenges that we still have is clarity about the metrics. And I think that would help the community to make these decisions if we had this guidance about, we have X amount of spread in the community, so we feel it's appropriate to be fully in school, but if it reaches X amount, then we switch to fully remote, or this will be the hybrid situation, how we will decide to open or close a specific school. I had the impression from the governor that at the press conference before the guidance came out that they were going to be providing that, but now I'm not as sure. So I wonder if you have any information on that, and if they don't provide the guidance, are we supposed to just come up with these metrics locally?
No, I think based on things that we have heard in our conversations with the Commissioner of Education, as well as yesterday, the governor has a statewide call every Wednesday for municipal officials, including superintendents, and several of us from CABE are on that call as well. Clearly, they do intend to provide those metrics. They will be community-based metrics, not school-specific. And the reason they're waiting is they're trying to, as we gather more health information, they feel they're going to be able to give a better framework than if it's like everything else. They could set out one framework now, and by early August, it might look very different.
Okay, that's very helpful to know that that's definitely coming. So you feel it would be safe to fully say that at our public meetings, that we are awaiting this guidance and definitely going to provide it.
Yes, and that you will be, your local decisions will be based on that state framework.
Okay, thank you.
I might add, Sheila, that we've also heard, and we don't know a lot about it, that CDC guidance would be coming next week. There's so many more comments, but I'm just going to land that one there.
Apparently, within the past hour, the CDC indicated that they will not be modifying their guidance. So I think some of us feel comforted to know that those that health professionals will continue to make those decisions, and not those without medical degrees.
That's the update.
You heard it here first. Other comments?
I was just going to make a suggestion, and that is that there's a decision that I think every board is going to have to make, and you might as well start working on it now. And that is, if we're going to open school, I presume we're going to open it with every student and teacher masked, some people wearing other PPE. But what are you going to do with students who either refuse or are not attentive in their use of wearing of masks. I mean, I got to tell you, if you've been in a grocery store lately, you've seen an awful lot of young people who work there wearing the mask over every part of their face except their nose. And you're going to likely see that in school because it's bloody uncomfortable, hot, and annoying to wear one of these things, and to expect someone to sit there for 6 or 7 hours and wear it for most of that time if they can't social distance sufficiently. I think we need to really think that through, and I think boards need to be in advance decide how they're going to treat it. Are you going to treat a student who refuses to wear a mask like a student who refuses to be inoculated against various maladies? I think you got to start wrestling with it because it's an ugly decision, and there's political dimensions to it as well.
And that issue was discussed within the past week at the school discipline collaborative meeting. And the suggestions around that were very strongly on the side of, since our goal is getting students back to school, to try to use methods other than removal from the classroom for noncompliance. One suggestion was around incentives, particularly for younger students, to make it sort of a challenge in a positive way to be good mask wearers and good community caring individuals. Any thoughts around that specific issue from others?
I had a thought in terms of that. I think we have to be realistic, and teachers are going to have to change the way they teach. We're going to have to give our kids more breaks and be able to, if a kid is really having a hard time, let them leave the classroom, take the mask off. I think we're going to have to really rethink the traditional classroom as we know it, and be very sensitive to kids. I would be adamantly opposed to any punishment for any child who does not wear a mask. I think it has to be incentive. It has to be a positive atmosphere. And if a kid is really having a hard time, then we have to sit down with them and give them more options, distance learning or some kind of a hybrid. But I just don't think we can punish kids at this point.
Well, I wasn't suggesting punishment. What I was suggesting is you have to make a decision of whether you're going to allow that person in. You know, we want to get the schools open. We want to get kids back to school. But if you end up with an outbreak in a school, you're going to be closing that school forthwith, and you're going to be doing distance learning again. And I think that it's a hard decision. No, we want a positive atmosphere. No, we don't want to punish kids, but we also don't want to punish the rest of the students. And don't forget, they're teachers. I mean, you're putting your staff in the line of fire here. You go to the grocery store, it's not the patrons who are likely to get sick. It's the person behind the meat counter carving something up for you that has to deal with everybody. It's the same thing here. Your teachers are going to be at risk, and you could get into an ugly situation if this happens. And that's why I think it's got to be thought through, because you don't want to do it in a punitive way, but you also don't want to leave yourself open to having your school closed.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that the child needs to have options and maybe do distance learning or become more isolated. I think we just have to figure out, but I do agree that it's going to be, there's no easy answer, let's put it that way.
Right.
Other comments, things that are on your mind? I know everything's on our mind, but.
Can you hear me? Or Patrice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Patrice Baker. I really appreciate Greg's comments, because I think that they really hit home for teachers like myself. It's very different when you're in a school versus when you're making decisions for a school. And I think that he's absolutely 100% accurate in terms of there need to be guidelines. If it's masks. And students need to be able to wear them, because just as a teacher, you don't want to be putting yourself in harm's way of disregarding social distancing by trying to get a student to wear the mask, because you're not supposed to be touching faces or body parts. So I think it's a huge challenge, and I think that fortunately decisions have not been made yet on how schools are going to open, and distance learning may be the safer way. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Eileen.
Hi, this This is Lydia from Simsbury. I think a really big dilemma that we hear and that we think about is how do you enforce students that are in the early childhood programs, preschool programs, K1, wear the mask all day. That is a concern that parents have, and I'm sure, you know, if you ask a pre-K or K or, you know, grade 1 child to wear it all day, what do they think they're going to say? So that is something that I think every district is grasping with, is how do you enforce that for safety reasons, or what do you do for safety reasons for these students and children?
Patrice, could I ask a second question?
Sure, Candace.
Thank you. So I am hearing I'm just curious if there's any truth to this. From other parents, we're getting some emails saying, you know, this or that district is not going to have every student back in school. They're going directly to a hybrid model. My read of the guidance from the governor is that unless the health conditions change, and we're waiting for those metrics, but unless the conditions change, that it's sort of it's essentially a mandate, like everybody's going back to school unless conditions deteriorate and we change to another model. So I'm curious, are there districts that are just skipping that step, or is it in fact a mandate?
We read the governor's directive and in our conversations with the commissioner that all districts should have essentially 3 sets of plans, which would be implemented depending upon variations in the metrics. But that the first plan should be, under our current health data, it would be all students back in school 5 days a week, unless their families chose to have them continue some form of distance learning. I did see in the paper last night that the Hampden Board of Education's initial plan was essentially a hybrid model. Middle and high school students would be in school 2 days a week. In other words, half of them on 2 days, half of them the other 2 days, and that there would be a shortened school day for the elementary students, with them in smaller cohorts, part of the day with a paraprofessional supporting them in distance learning, and part of the day with their classroom teacher. Again, that's what we read in the newspaper last night. I don't know if other districts are looking at that, and we don't know what the response of the Department of Education will be. They've made it clear that while plans have to be submitted by July 24th, they're not going to be approving plans per se, but I don't know what their mechanism will be if they feel that a district's plan does not fulfill the directive from the governor.
So thank you for kind of elaborating that situation. I guess my question back to you would be, you know, what is your advice to boards that the appropriate thing to be doing right now is submitting the 3 plans, but as of now, planning everybody's coming back on day 1, unless we hear otherwise through the state metrics? Or should we feel free, if our community is more conservative than the state in terms of their risk tolerance, to go ahead and just do a hybrid plan like Hampden seems to be doing?
The guidance, unless we hear differently from the department, and we will pursue clarification now that there is actually a plan that's been put out there that seems to be different from what the governor's directive would have required. Our guidance would be you should proceed with a plan that assumes access for all students 5 days a week.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. But clarity would be helpful given that that's out there now.
Yeah. Any other final comments?
This is Pat King, and I have a question.
Sure, Pat.
In an effort to have consistent instruction for all students, has anyone thought of having the distant learning students Zoom into the classroom?
I know districts have thought about that. Is anyone on this call from a district where you're considering that?
It would save quite a bit of resources with regard to district, teachers.
Exactly. I know there are issues that there may be a need to bargain the impact of that, because doing live transmission is not necessarily considered part of the regular duties of a teacher. But I do think it's certainly a viable option to consider.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if no one has any other burning comment to make, it is noon, and respecting your time, we'll bring today's session to a close. We look forward to talking with you again next Thursday at 11 a.m. And we wish you a healthy and productive week. Thanks so much, everyone.